did that guy, were you interviewing in Mexico?
I was interviewing him in Mexico.
You guys go to Mexico?
What was that?
How often do you guys go to Mexico?
We have people in Mexico always. I've been going for at least once a week, depending on how long you stay there varies. And for different times I'll stay for, a week at a time or longer periods. We have full-time volunteers who are there always.
Do you ever get hassled going back and forth? Like, do people get, I mean, I don't know, it sounds like the police, particularly the Border Patrol, is really corrupt, and so has anybody that you work with been hassled or like assaulted or anything?
We get hassled all the time in the desert and on the border, but I've been screamed at before and threatened, but I've never been assaulted. I don't know if anyone's been assaulted. There's a great deal of privilege, citizenship privilege mainly, and also a number of other types of privilege that come into play, but yeah, we get hassled. We don't experience anything but even in the realm of what other folks do.
Is there some kind of list or something with families in the area that are immigrant families that might need some kind of care package, like food for the family or something that we could just provide?
That's an awesome question. I don't know, maybe someone here could. That's a really good question. One thing we're doing that is being developed, some people actually, a few months ago when it came, got a bunch of names for. We're trying to develop a deportee support network list for the whole country, meaning when we meet anyone in the border, they say, I was deported from this city, hopefully we have someone, right? So then we can call our contacts in that city and have resources, have people to support the family. That's being worked on a lot right now. From our end, from who we see who's been deported. I think, and as our list gets better, I'd love to, I wonder how the easiest way to do it, to leave contact info, or so anyone who wants can get on that list. But besides that, I'm sure that you all might be able to connect in communities here to find out about deportations. We obviously don't see everyone, we only see a portion. Prices have gone up and up and up, and it was the coyote industry was one that's been basically consolidated into the cartel industry from everything we've heard. You used to have a number of people who did it on their own or who even knew the area, would help friends out at relatively lower prices. Till now where basically anyone you find, almost everyone I would say, is involved in the cartels. Low level, right? Like I'm not saying that just to vilify people and say awful people or something. Coyotes tend to be lowest of levels, so do people call them burros, people carrying drugs in, tend to be people in the most desperate of situations. So, but that's mostly an industry that has been consolidated by the cartels, and so prices have gone up. I hear anything from 3,000 to 7,000. Would you say that's accurate, Matt? I've heard basically a range of that, 3,000 to 7,000. And a lot of that's on credit now, so it's a type of indentured servitude, really, because you don't have that, you come and you're working to pay that off. Yeah.
What's Mexico's stance?
What was that?
What's Mexico's stance?
I have a good answer for that. Like political leaders like Calderon works with the U.S. government. The Merida Initiative is probably the best example. The U.S. government and Mexican government work together and are supporting one another. Basically, Mexico is being supported a lot by the U.S. to fight cartels, to fight human trafficking, to fight drugs, right? A lot of that, in my opinion, is actually going to repress social movements. A lot of those officers are actually being stationed in areas like Chiapas. But the Mexican government response varies on whatever specific issue you're talking about. Grupo Beta is a Mexican government group. It's kind of like Border Patrol in the south. They keep people out from Guatemala. I don't particularly like the group. I think they're really callous and they can be cold, and I don't like working with them when I'm in Nogales, but they do have a lot of good work, and that's officially a Mexican government group, right? The Mexican government will pay half the price of someone's ticket to go back home if they want to, once they've been at the border. They give phone calls, so it's really hard to get in there. They provide services in Mexico, so there is some positive response there. I don't know if that's like a good example or answer at all to something like Mexico's response. So big, and also take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is what I've seen and what I think is like Mexico has every response, I guess.
Well, it's a really broad topic, so
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah.
gonna say.
Yup.
So when you said they're coerced into signing like deportation papers when they are detained. So as soon as they sign those papers, do they just take them out of prison and send them back like instantly? Is that, and if they choose not to sign it, then they can stay in prison for longer periods? Or how's that
That's
work?
the issue, you're right, okay? So Operation Streamline, and to the best of my knowledge, I've asked and haven't been clarified yet on this, some people say, 2 people ever have pled not guilty, and those people won their cases. So you're looking at 1325 and 1327, I think is what they're called legally. Are those the numbers? Okay, I think they are. I get jumbled with numbers. Doesn't really matter. Either 1325 or 1327. Those have to do with illegal entry, illegal re-entry, present without documentation, right? Crossing somewhere other than a designated port of entry. It's all these things that people are getting charged with. And to have a case, at least in a U.S. court of law, right, you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, you can do that if someone signs something. So Border Patrol basically has a template that they make everyone sign. People say not to. I've heard stories of being hit, being yelled at, right? Like there's actual coercion. But then there's the type of coercion you described. People are in prison and they can take a plea bargain through Operation Streamline or through voluntary deportation, and that basically means you get to leave today. And I don't know anyone who, you know, you've got to be real strong, and you've got to be like really convicted and actually understand and have any ample time with your lawyer to not take that plea and say, okay, I'll leave today, deport me. But that comes with a stipulation of if you try again, you're criminalized even more, right? So what's happening is people are also being physically, verbally coerced, but then they're also being coerced because, yeah, this sounds like a better deal, leave today. But if you were to actually fight your case and say, no, I refuse to sign and stay in, well, A, the courts and the jails would be overwhelmed and it would shut down. Anyone I've talked to says Operation Streamline would be shut down if one day everyone pled not guilty, right? Like they function because everyone says guilty, 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 guilty on next one. So the answer is like you really could clog the system, but how do you convince someone? Well, A, you don't have access to convince the person, right? And how do you, with a good conscience, even want to try to convince someone to say, hey, stay in prison.
Yeah.
Don't take the plea, right?
And then I have another question. When they are deported, are they all taken to the same place? Like where do they drop them off? Like where are they taken? Because you said the Mexican government will pay half their ticket to get them home, or like however to get all these people back to their families. But I mean, if they're all just being dropped off in one place, like that could cause a huge problem as well.
Totally, and it does. So you have problems in these border towns where things are dangerous. There's tons of problems associated with that. You have bilateral deportation is what the U.S. government calls it, and people are being deported to Juarez, people are being deported to Agua Prieta, to Nogales, before Naco, and sometimes, I don't know if Lukeville's getting it anymore. You've got Tijuana, right? You've got all these places along the border, and that's another abuse problem. Families are being separated, though the U.S. says they don't separate families. So a husband and wife are together, they send the husband to one side, wife to the other.
And they don't get to choose where they go.
They don't get to choose. Kid to one side, parent to the other, right? That happens a lot. Another policy that the U.S. government does when they have money, you happen at the end of the last fiscal year a lot, because they were trying to run through all their money, was something called internal repatriation, which meant the U.S. government was flying people to Mexico City. That's in an attempt to have people not try to recross, right? You say you're flying someone back to the center of the country, well, it's going to be harder to get all the way back up and cross, but people do it. It's just another way to like make someone's life hell, right? But yeah, I don't know if that answered that well. People are being deported all over.
Not sure.
Nogales is one of the biggest. Tends to be. It's always fluctuating. Nogales tends to be really steady, high numbers of deportees. It's right in the heart of Arizona. If anyone doesn't know, it's the bottom, right in the middle of the state.